everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Alex and today I'm going to be giving you some historical fiction recommendations. Now a little while back I posted a contemporary recommendations video and I got a lot of positive feedback on that, and I have been wanting to do more genre specific recommendations videos, so I thought today would be the perfect day to dive into another one of my favorite genres, and that is historical fiction. One of the things that I really enjoy about historical fiction is its ability to blend with other genres. So I think that pretty much every genre can commingle with other genres, but historical fiction is a really easy place to do that. You can just have a normal historical fiction where you're just telling the life of somebody in the past, or you can combine it with a fantasy or sci-fi or horror kind of element, which I think is just really fascinating. So today I'm just going to be going through and telling you about some of my favorite historical fiction reads. If you are new here and you're not subscribed already, go ahead and click the red subscribe button down below as well as the bell icon so that you don't miss any of my content. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, there are two authors in particular that I want to talk about that I feel like you can't discuss historical fiction without mentioning their names. I have one young adult author and one adult author. So for the young adult author, I'm going to be talking about Ruta Sepetys. As of filming this, Ruta Sepetys has 3 historical fiction novels out, with one due to release in October of 2019. And Ruta Sepetys is really known for highlighting events in history that don't get discussed that often. So for example, this novel, Between Shades of Grey, follows our main character Lena during World War II, but instead of the typical World War II stories that you might be accustomed to hearing about, it follows our main character as she and her family are taken from their home in Lithuania to a concentration camp in Siberia. This trek to Siberia is something that actually happened, but not a lot of people talk about it because I feel like that gets overshadowed by a lot of what was happening in Germany and mainland Europe throughout World War II. But Ruta Sepetys does an amazing job of bringing these little known historical events to life, making you really care about the characters and making you really feel like you're there. Another one of my favorites from Ruta Sepetys is Salt to the Sea, which is another World War II historical fiction, but it actually follows the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was a more tragic maritime event than the Titanic. Again, this is something that we don't hear a whole lot about, and this novel really does a beautiful job of making you care about these fictional characters and learn about this real life event. Now for adult historical fiction, of course, you have to talk about Kristen Hanna. Her most popular by far is The Nightingale, once again a World War II historical fiction novel following 2 sisters that are doing their own equal parts to fight in the war. This is an incredibly popular novel, and for very, very good reason. Kristen Hanna does a beautiful job of just putting you right there in the middle of the action, making you really feel for the characters, just tearing your heart out basically, and she just does a phenomenal job. My other favorite historical fiction from Kristen Hanna is The Great Alone, which I mentioned it not too long ago. I gave it an easy 5 out of 5 stars. This one is set in 1974 in Alaska. We get to follow our main character Lenny, who is 13 at the beginning of the novel, and her father comes home from the Vietnam War, is suffering from some pretty bad PTSD, and they end up moving the family up to Alaska to try to get a fresh start, and you get to see how this new environment wreaks havoc on the family. I think both of these novels are just beautiful pieces of literature with really strong characters and an incredibly strong sense of place. So if that's something you're looking for and you haven't read Kristen Hanna yet, I would definitely recommend it. Now I'm going to talk about 2 historical fiction novels from another author, but this author doesn't primarily write historical fiction. They're kind of in their own space, but those 2 novels are The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I feel like these 2 are novels that pretty much everybody has read by now, and Taylor Jenkins Reid primarily actually writes romance and contemporary, but these 2 are historical fiction ventures by her, and I think that they are beautifully done. Now, the interesting thing about these 2 is that they are historical fiction and you're mainly following a storyline in the past, but there is a bit of a contemporary element thrown into each of them. So in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, we follow our main character Monique, who is an up-and-coming reporter in our day and age, and she is called upon to do an interview and start writing a biography for this Hollywood starlet named Evelyn Hugo. So throughout the vast majority of the novel, you are hearing Evelyn's life story, taking you through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but the story itself is actually taking place in our present day. In the same kind of way, Daisy Jones and the Six is told in an interview style format, so the interview is taking place in our present day, but every member of this fictional band called Daisy Jones and the Six is talking about their rise to fame in the 1970s and then why they broke up. So while the actual story itself, the interviews are taking place today, the bulk of what we hear about are events that happened back in the 70s. I think that Taylor Jenkins Reid's strength are in her characters. In both of these novels, it was incredibly hard for me to believe that these characters were not real people. Evelyn Hugo never existed. Daisy Jones and the Six was not a real band. And grasping that is really hard because Taylor Jenkins Reid does a phenomenal job of bringing these characters to life, making you feel for them, making you root for them, and just creating such a rich environment around them that just really lends themselves well to this historical fiction world. And I really hope that she continues to write these historical fiction novels in the future. Now for one that's a little bit more genre bending than I wanted to discuss is the Diviners series by Libba Bray. The Diviners is set in 1920s New York, and it follows our main character Evie, who has the ability to tell the history of an item just by touching it. Evie starts to work with her uncle to solve murder cases, and she gets overly invested and gets into a lot more trouble than she probably means to. If you are interested in this series and if you have access to the audiobook, that is 100% what I would recommend to you. The narrator is January Lavoie and she does an absolutely incredible job. This novel has a very large cast of characters and she gives each of them a very distinct voice and keeps them all their own individual people, which I really appreciate, and she just does such a great job. So if you can listen to the audiobook, please do. This series is up to 3 books right now, and the 4th book is going to be coming out in early 2020. I absolutely cannot wait for it. I think that Libba Bray has done a beautiful job at combining historical fiction and fantasy. The stakes are just getting higher and higher with every single book, and this is just phenomenal. I would really love to reread the series before the 4th one comes out, just because I just want to go back into this world. But regardless, if you like 1920s New York and you haven't picked up the Diviners yet, I beg you to go do it. Also, what I would recommend is October is right around the corner, and these are kind of spoopy. So I read all 3 of the first books last October and loved doing that, getting into the Halloween spirit with these. So now's the time. The next one that I want to talk about is Passenger by Alexandra Bracken. This novel follows our main character, Etta, who is a violin prodigy, and one day she randomly gets thrust back in time. She winds up coming aboard the ship of Nicholas Carter, and they come to find out that this family called the Ironwoods are after Etta because they are searching for something that they think only she can give them. So they wind up just being on the run and traveling through time, trying to escape, figure out why Etta is now in the past, yada yada. Now I will say, this one took me a while to get into. It really took me about the first third to get a grip on the plot and be really interested in it, but once I hit about that third of the way through, it was phenomenal. I haven't read any of Alexandra Bracken's other work, but this one I really appreciated, again, the way that she kind of combined the genres of historical fiction and a little bit of sci-fi. I have not finished this duology, but I would like to go back and reread Passenger before I do that, but regardless, if you're into time travel, this is a good one. And the last one I want to talk about today is Ask Again Yes by Mary Beth Keane. Now, this novel is a very strong literary fiction, so if you need a whole lot of plot and constant action to enjoy a book, this one is not going to be for you. Now, this book starts in the 1970s and it follows these 2 neighboring families. You get to see one big event that occurs that really tears them apart, and then you follow them up through today. This novel is incredibly slow moving. It tackles a lot of issues like mental health and alcoholism. And this is really just a character study, so if you like getting into people's heads and you don't need a whole lot of plot, you're okay just following characters throughout their lives, then this one might be for you. Now again, it's not completely historical fiction all the way through because it does come up into present day, but those elements in the beginning are really interesting, getting to see this family operate in the 1970s. And while the time period isn't really at the forefront of the novel, it definitely does put you in a certain mindset, and Mary Beth Keane does a really nice job of weaving that into her narrative. So again, if you're a fan of historical fiction and you're looking for a good read, this one has been pretty popular on BookTube in the last couple of months, so if you haven't picked it up yet, might as well go for it. So that is it for my historical fiction recommendations. This is a genre that I do really enjoy, but I feel like I haven't read enough of. So if you have any other historical fiction recommendations, go ahead and drop them in the comments down below. I always love to chat with you guys down there. If you like what you saw today, give this video a big thumbs up, and if you are not already, hit the subscribe button and the bell button so that you don't miss out on any of my content. So until next time, bye!